This is going to be a tough one. You ready? In the past on this channel, we've occasionally mentioned that we think there are times where we would encourage people to walk away from a gaming table. To try and succinctly sum up the argument, we argue basically to protect your peace. That if people are playing a game that you don't think you want to play, you don't need to start a game with them just because you started a chat with them. That if you don't care for their behavior, you don't owe anyone the luxury of your presence. And that you should feel empowered to draw your lines, to enforce your boundaries, and feel free to exit situations that you want to exit. And this has occasionally been met with some challenge, pushback, and critique, and that's what I'd like to try to engage with today. Coupled with this, it's also very, very common for me to see some people alleging that Rule 0 and pregame discussions are, in a word, useless. That it sounds nice chatting first to make sure that everyone's on the same page as one another, but that it doesn't actually work. And that championing pregame discussions as some sort of inoculation against bad games demonstrates that some people, especially those with a platform, are failing to understand the actual experiences of the average player. Now, those are points that I disagree with, and I want to get into why, but real quick, in the interest of full transparency, I think it's important for me to first disclose that one of the big reasons I think that I disagree is because I've somewhat frequently seen people voice those types of opinions in a fairly unkind way, such as calling pregame discussions the worst part of Commander, or saying that talking about Rule 0 proves how out of touch you are, or, I don't know, there are some people who cannot help but make that type of argument while also spewing a bunch of hate speech my way, and it's like, yeah, I don't have a very charitable interpretation of that kind of person. And also, your dad calls me daddy. Get over it. But what I'd like to do is get over my knee-jerk reaction to those types of statements and actually unravel the argument. Because even if some people are dinguses about it, the overall argument is still worth examining critically. And in doing so, hopefully I can get a better understanding of that stance and give a better understanding of my own. I'll start with the pre-game discussion part, a chat before the game begins to make sure everyone's on the same page. I do this basically every single game, even against my friend groups, even against my dedicated play groups. I'm still like, hey, what are we in the mood for right now? Are we thinking like a tutory type of game, a fast game? How many turns do we want to go? What's the experience we're all hoping to get right now? I still find the importance of pregame discussions to be paramount. So why do some folks feel so differently? Well, it's because the act of trying to have those pregame discussions and set those expectations has simply not gone well for them. They try to have the talk, but then a lot of bad stuff could happen. For example, the other players could be bad at explaining what their decks do. Oh yeah, I think my deck's probably like a 7, yeah. Or the people they're trying to play with are, in a word, inflexible. I mean, yeah, it's a combo deck. I don't know what else you expected. Win on turn 4 if you don't know how to play removal. I mean, this is the only deck I brought, so. Or they have their own house rules and house bans that get to be a little bit much. Ooh, I think I just found a group looking for one more. Okay, it says no fast mana, no counterspells, no infect, no extra turns, no combos, no tutors, including fetches, no dockside, no cyclerift, no extra combats, no. Or they outright lie about what their intentions are. Oh yeah, it's like a pillow fort deck. And worse, they try to play coy. I swear my deck has never done this before. So these folks have wound up with crappy game experiences as a result of those failed conversations, and it probably sounds pretty patronizing to hear someone else talk about how helpful they find a pregame discussion to be. And literally as I was writing out all my thoughts on this topic, we got this just absolute gut punch of a comment on one of the episodes where we were discussing this subject. Quote, "Why are you having a pregame talk if you can't leave afterwards?" Holy, I got nothing. I did a whole rewrite and reshoot because of that comment. Why do you feel you can't leave? Is it just me, or does that comment strike anyone else as just totally heartbreaking? For me, the way a pregame talk usually manifests is just something like, okay, so it sounds like we're going turn 9 kind of decks. Cool. So I've got a Reanimator deck and my Conrad deck here, but they can be pretty brutal. They're pretty fast, so I won't pull those out. So instead, what have I got? All right, so this is Wilhelt, very classic zombies. I know some people do combo with him. I'm not doing combos. It's just a lot of tokens, and then I go RAR, a lot of zombie lords and things like that. And then I've also got Yanet, which is a lot of top deck manipulation. It's not going to be tutors. I'm not playing expropriates or void winners or anything like that. It's more like brainstorming a Nezahal to the top of my library, a bunch of those kind of things. So yeah, zombies and top deck. Do either of those sound fun? What are people in the mood for? And if it turns out they're interested in playing something that I'm not prepared to play, then the conversation will usually just go like, ooh, okay. So I probably misread the energy when I first sat down. I don't think I have something that would match up to what you guys are doing, and I obviously don't want to get in the way of the game experience that you're looking for. I think it might be best if I find a different table, and I hope you guys find a fourth. That's how those conversations tend to go for me. They feel very natural. So to hear someone say, you can't leave afterwards, I'm like, who's forcing you to be there? Why do you feel obligated to stay there? My heart aches for that. I don't know. You know what? Maybe I'm reading it wrong. Maybe it's actually the start to a horror movie. You know, like you can't leave afterwards, right? Maybe? I don't know. And that you can't leave afterwards is also connected to the other concern that I mentioned at the top of the video, the idea of walking away from a game. Why isn't that perceived to be a possible solution? When we on this channel propose it as a solution, as a thing that you can do, why do people push back against that idea so vehemently? Based on the things that I've read from people, there are two main reasons. First, not everyone has a regular play group or a large showing at their local game store. So it's important to address that for some people, walking away from a table means you don't get to play Magic at all. And if that's the only shot that you've got to play Magic at all, then just walk away seems like glib, hollow advice. The second reason I see is that some folks will claim it's actually quite rude to just walk away, which again, I disagree, but I know where that sentiment comes from. Because, I mean, yeah, there are a lot of ways in which a person walking away from a gaming table can go down poorly. I think for many people, the image that comes to mind when they think of a person walking away from a gaming table is someone who's getting all huffy and upset that things didn't go their way and who storms off in a tantrum. You know, big sore loser energy. And so then, by association, the mental image of someone walking away during a pregame conversation can also appear to carry that same energy. But that's just a mental association. That's not the actual reality. I mean, the times that I've seen a pregame walk away have been moments like when someone realizes they pulled out a lightly modded precon against a table that was going for hard combo or CEDH territory. And everyone's like, oops, let's all look around for different players so that we all get what we're looking for. But here's the thing, I'm not just going to defend a departure pre-game. There are also some instances where I would defend a departure mid-game too. The sanctity of a game is not more important than a person. I've absolutely sat down against groups who seemed perfectly pleasant at first, and then partway through, they started making some jokes that were low-key, pretty offensive. Or just like high-key, that's really sexist behavior. That's not the energy that I want to be around. Probably they want to get a rise, but I'm just not here for this. And I'm certainly not going to just stay silent because I don't want my silence to read as a tacit endorsement to everybody that I'm cool with that type of nonsense because they're acting like a butt. And no, I don't want to be around that. I'm not going to launch into a lecture about it. Like, nobody wants that either. I'm not seeking a confrontation. I was just here to game, and they're being stupid. The only leverage I have in this type of moment is my presence. And I'm going to use that leverage. I'm going to use my presence as leverage, because if you act like a dingus, you get treated like a dingus, and you don't get to enjoy my fabulous company. So, deuces. I'm going to peace out. And I'm happy to encourage other people to draw that type of line for themselves as well. And in fact, if it was especially bad behavior, I'm probably going to let the LGS owner know about it too. Actions have consequences. And let's not make any false equivalencies here. I used an example earlier of a group that house bans a whole bunch of different stuff, and yes, that is a version of drawing a boundary, but we all know that there's quite a bit of difference between that and refusing to put up with someone who's, for example, running their mouth about queer people. Like this game is not so important that I will put up with fundamental basic disrespect just so I can see whether or not the elf deck wins. If you say something offensive about my husband's ethnic group, I'm gonna let you be alone forever where you belong. Now, admittedly, those are obvious and extreme examples, so I'd like to get more into the nitty-gritty here, where the substance of a game itself can also still sometimes be a justifiable reason to walk away from a table. To use a recent legend as an example, the Beamtown Bullies are pretty famous for giving people a bunch of really awful stuff, and that commonly includes certain cards like Eater of Days or Hellcarver Demon, which respectively make people skip their turns or make them sacrifice everything they have in play. But even when that happens, a game can still take more than half an hour to actually close out. In an instance like that, I understand why someone might feel like that's not an experience that they want to see through to the very end, particularly if they didn't know just how cutthroat that experience was about to be when they first sat down. Dare I say there are some strategies that don't really make you feel like you're actually getting to play Magic the Gathering? Our free time is precious. We often have to rearrange or cancel a whole bunch of plans just to try and line up a single game day in a week. And if you only have that limited amount of time to try and get those games in, and then when it actually happens, you're not really getting to play, and you don't feel like that experience is really worth the time and the preparation that all went into it, I mean, yeah, I don't have it in me to say I blame you. That doesn't strike me as a person walking away in an angry, huffy tantrum. That strikes me as a person who's just disappointed that the thing that they were looking forward to all week just deflated. And they're hoping to mentally reset, get a little bit of distance, and relocate the joy that they were hoping to find. Now, some people might allege that it's the responsibility of the person to know what they signed up for when they sat down against those decks. But not everyone has an encyclopedic knowledge of what every commander is capable of, you know? Others might say that it's the responsibility of that Beamtown player to let other folks know what their deck is capable of executing. And this is largely the stance that I take, but I also get why it can be complicated. Because if you're telling everyone exactly what your deck is capable of, it can feel like you're just handing the win over to other people, and it doesn't really feel good. I mean, really, you do want to leave room for other people to still be surprised by the cool stuff that your deck can do. So yeah, I get that it's complicated. And of course, some out there will say, well, if you don't like it, play more removal, because I mean, someone out there has to be the least constructive voice in the room, I guess. And like, I get it, you guys. The average commander player probably could stand to play a little bit more interaction in their decks, but like, what are you doing? Do you think no one's ever made this argument before? Sorry, side note, but I swear sometimes this crowd is like trying to become a parody of themselves. Like a little bit ago, I put up this like jokey story about a funny thing that happened to me, and the number of people who screamed, "Just play more removal," was just shocking. They seem to think that my sharing a funny story was the same thing as me saying that I think a card should be banned. And I think it's really embarrassing for them to flaunt how bad they are at media comprehension. But anyway, yeah, 5 of the top 10 spells in the format are removal spells. Counterspell shows up in 43% of decks that are eligible to play it, but you know, go off, Queen. I don't know. The format is doing big, dumb, amazing stuff all the time. Sometimes you don't have an answer. It's fine. And heck, people lie. No amount of removal in a deck is going to destroy a lie. Like, to again give credit to the folks who say that a pregame discussion has not been successful for them. Yeah, some people lie about what they're gonna do. I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that 100% of my pregame discussions have been perfectly swimmingly successful. I've absolutely played games that I ended up just really not liking or regretting and wishing that I had pieced out sooner. There are times where someone has misrepresented what their deck was going to do, or times when someone's brought a very, very different energy. Like we were all hoping to kick back and relax, but then they turned out to be very angle shooty, rules lawyery, critiquing every single play. Literally folks who will criticize the cards that you're using or who will try and backseat game. It's just like a bad energy to be around. Or the classic, people who love to make a deal in the game and then break it. Yeah, I've absolutely had games where I'm just like, that sucked. And depending on the level of obnoxiousness, if someone deems those types of experiences to be the kind of thing they want to end sooner rather than later, I don't have it in me to judge them for that choice. The person who I have a strong opinion about in that situation is, the person who lied. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There are some people out there who would rather be good at a game than good to other people, and that is not my energy. Of course, there's an awkwardness to all of this. Sometimes that player really has never had their deck go off like that before. And personally, that's a thing that I feel like I just gotta judge on a case-by-case basis. I'm not out here to deflate the emotions of a person who just spent a bunch of money getting their really cool souped-up deck and they've been excited to play it all week and they don't actually realize that, these synergies are punching way above the weight class of the rest of the table. That happens. And there's also an even bigger awkwardness, and that, of course, is the other two people at the table. Leaving mid-game could, arguably, ruin the experience of those other two people when they didn't really necessarily do anything wrong. They were just there hoping to get a game in. I absolutely feel for that. In fact, I think it's such a powerful social force having those extra pairs of eyeballs on you that actually ends up keeping a lot of people glued to their seat, unwilling to say anything lest their discomfort be perceived as them causing a scene. And I'll be the first to say that yes, absolutely, there are folks who give up way before it is time to give up. I've had whole videos on this channel where the central thesis is simply, just because you don't have an answer doesn't mean there's no answer. Someone who scoops or steps away when it turns out that someone else was sitting on an answer to the big problem, yeah, that person's definitely not doing anyone any favors. Walking away is very obviously not the first solution to grab onto, and I'm very obviously not saying that it should be the first solution to grab onto. What I'm trying to do is simply express my concern at the number of people who have said that they don't think it should be an option at all. So to boil it down, yeah, other folks can be affected if you decide that you need to leave, but an important lesson to remember is simply this. You don't need to light yourself on fire to keep other people warm. They're big kids. I'm very sure that they'll be able to handle it. And I hope that you are able to communicate your discomfort and extricate yourself from uncomfortable situations in a way that respects yourself and hopefully that is respectful as possible to other people. If someone demonstrates that they don't give a toss about the experiences of everyone else at the rest of the table and that they only care about themselves, that's not something you have to put up with. You can leave afterwards. That's what this comes down to. To circle back around to those folks who only have the options of play with some unsavory attitudes or don't get to play Magic at all, the ultimate point isn't what you can or cannot do. The ultimate point is that knowing your limits is a good thing. Knowing what you're willing to put up with and what you're not is a good thing. Knowing when your time has been disrespected is a valuable life skill. And knowing that you are worthy of finding good times is an important mental fortitude that bad games just cannot beat out of you. A thing I'm worried about in making this type of video, and in fact a thing that held me back from wanting to make a video about this at all, is that to describe this phenomenon, I unfortunately have to highlight a fairly ugly part of the Commander player base, and in fact a fairly rare part of the Commander player base. Like, I don't want to give the accidental impression that this type of thing, like encountering people who lie or people who are being really unreasonable or whatever, I don't want to give the impression that that's like a super mega common thing, because in my experience, it isn't. These are rare things. And to talk about this phenomenon, I have to mention those things, but no, like that is not at all the overwhelming majority of my Commander experience. The overwhelming majority of my Commander experience is pre-game discussions going really dang well and never needing to walk away from an awkward social interaction. It has happened, but it's rare. I just want people to feel empowered to do what is right by them. That's it. That's all that this is. And whatever unfortunate stuff that we've talked about is not a unique problem to the Commander space. It's not even a unique problem to the Magic the Gathering gaming space. The unfortunate stuff that we encounter is kind of just a thing across nerd culture in general. Nerdy spaces are rife with way worse problems than the stuff that we've discussed here. But I don't know, I just think that it's relevant for us to say here because I genuinely think that it's useful to say that prioritizing the social aspect of the social format will make you better at the game itself. A better understanding of what your opponents expect is key to crafting entertaining experiences for you and for them. Having a better eye for when someone may or may not realize just how strong their deck actually is can prepare you for how to handle that game with them more gracefully. Take this as a parting example. There are some folks who don't really care for Triumph of the Hordes because they feel it produces a win that just kind of comes out of nowhere. But what if I disclosed at the very beginning of the game that I have one Infect card in this deck? Well, suddenly it's not coming out of nowhere. Suddenly the emotion's a little bit different. It's like that Hitchcock quote, right? Like if a bomb goes off in the middle of a scene, then yeah, the audience gets like 5 seconds of shock. But if at the start of the scene, the filmmaker showed that bomb ticking away under the table, well, suddenly the whole mood of that scene was completely changed. You've created a lot of tension. By letting you know that I'm playing one Triumph of the Hordes in this deck, suddenly we have some narrative tension in this game. Is it going to show up? Who can say? And that's what I'd like to leave you with. If so far to this point you have not had a very successful experience with pregame conversations and they haven't really led to a lot of enjoyable experiences for you, well, maybe next time it could potentially be helpful to try out this new approach. You know, it doesn't just have to be a pregame conversation about just leveling the playing field. It can also be about introducing a Chekhov's gun into the screenplay, so to speak, about making your audience wonder whether that's going to go off on turn 7. That way the conversation doesn't feel like just some drab obligation that you got to fulfill before you can shuffle up and play. It actually can turn into yet another extension of the game, yet another chance to craft some excitement, to cause the potential for people to actually be happy, to be excited when suddenly that thing that you hinted at the very beginning actually comes into fruition later in the game. And to continue this movie metaphor, if someone tries to pull a dumb and disrespectful plot twist on you, well, I don't know, for me, I don't feel like I need to waste my time on the Commander equivalent of an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Like, I see you've got the Avatar: The Last Airbender live action. Not really what I was going for. I think I'm going to remove myself from that situation. As a final note, we got this comment a little while ago, and to borrow a phrase, I feel very seen right now. Like, yeah, you caught me. I absolutely think that being good to other people makes you better at gaming, and I hope that that resonates with a lot of you out there too. And I think that's everything. All that's left to do now is to remind you, EDH wreck your deck before you wreck your deck.